Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Millennium TV News. This is Fahmid Islam with you. Before moving on, let's look at today's top stories. Obama to become first US leader to address African Union. David Cameron says UK property no safe haven for dirty money. IS conflict, NATO to discuss Turkey-Syria border crisis. Cuba removed from US human trafficking list. Libya trial, Gaddafi's son sentenced to death over war crimes. Those were the headlines, now the details. He is the first US leader to deliver a speech at the 54-member body, with security and action against terrorism likely to dominate the agenda. On Monday, Mr. Obama praised Ethiopia as an outstanding partner in taking on militant Islamists. He said Ethiopia had weakened Al-Qaeda-linked Al-Shabaab group in Somalia. The US president was speaking after talks with Ethiopia's PM Hailemariam Desalegn during the first ever visit by a US president to the East African state. He also called on Mr. Hailemariam to improve Ethiopia's record on human rights and good governance. "I don't bite my tongue too much when it comes to these issues," he said at a joint press conference in the capital, Addis Ababa. Some right groups have criticized Mr. Obama's visit, warning that it could lend credibility to a government accused of jailing journalists and critics. A legal case currently being fought through the U.S. courts alleges that agents of the Ethiopian government eavesdropped on the internet activities of a man in the U.S. state of Maryland. The man, born in Ethiopia and now a U.S. citizen, works for a political opposition group outlawed in his home country. Addressing the media, Mr. Obama described the Ethiopian government, which won all parliamentary seats in May's election, as democratically elected. Opposition group have said the poll was rigged. Mr. Obama flew to Ethiopia after a two-day visit to Kenya, where he had discussed trade and security, but also called for greater human rights and warned of the dangers of corruption. Speaking in Singapore, the Prime Minister vowed to expose the use of anonymous shell companies to buy luxury UK properties, often in London. The PM said his message was, "London is not a place to stash your dodgy cash." Corruption, he added, was a cancer which is at the heart of so many of the world's problems and must be tackled. Mr. Cameron is on a 4-day tour of Southeast Asia. On Monday, he announced the UK and Indonesia had agreed measures to counter the shared enemy of Islamic State extremism. Later in the trip, he will travel to Malaysia and Vietnam. He has been accompanied by 31 British business leaders in an attempt to drum up trade with the UK and has also discussed the fight against terrorism with his counterparts. Describing corruption as the enemy of progress, he called for a global effort to tackle it, saying the world has looked the other way for too long. Citing the steps taken by the UK and Singapore to tackle corruption as part of enforcing a rules-based financial and legal system, Mr. Cameron said a zero-tolerance approach boosted trust and could improve business profitability and economic growth. A 2014 report by anti-poverty organization ONE said an estimated $1 trillion, £600 billion a year was being taken out of poor countries because of corruption, warning of the use of phantom firms and money laundering. Turkey was until recently a reluctant partner in the U.S. coalition against IS, but over the past few days, it has bombed IS and Kurdish positions. Turkey is also backing plans for a buffer zone on the border with Syria. Turkey's prime minister said he expects his country's allies to show solidarity and support for its campaign. Meanwhile, Turkish police have continued to arrest suspected members of IS, the PKK and leftist groups, more than 1,000 over the past week. Media captioned the threat from the group calling itself Islamic State could revive animosity between Turks and Kurds. The US and Turkey are working together on plans to create an IS-free zone along the border with Syria. Turkey is struggling with more than 1.8 million refugees from the Syrian conflict. Such a deal would significantly increase the scope of the US-led air war against IS in northern Syria, say analysts. The crisis has exacerbated tensions in a part of Turkey where a conflict between the outlawed PKK and government troops has killed about 40,000 people since 1984. Syrian Kurds are outside the scope of the current military effort, Turkey insists. Last week, Turkey agreed to allow the US to use its air base at Incirlik to launch airstrikes against IS. Turkey called a meeting of ambassadors to NATO under a clause allowing members to request a summit if their territorial integrity or security is threatened. It is only the fifth such request in the alliance's history. The annual State Department report comes a week after Cuba and the U.S. formally restored diplomatic relations. The United States previously accused Cuba's communist authorities of forcing people to travel abroad to work on government-backed projects. The U.S. also removed Malaysia from the list of countries failing to address human trafficking. Cuba was first included on the State Department's annual trafficking in persons list in 2003. U.S. Undersecretary of State for Civilian Security, Democracy and Human Rights, Sarah Sewall, and Cuba had made progress in combating sex trafficking, but concerns remained over the country's failures to address forced labor. She said, "The government of Cuba does not fully comply with the minimum standards for elimination of trafficking. However, it is making significant efforts to do so," reads the report. On 28 July, Cuba reopened its embassy in Washington after more than 5 decades of strained relations. The American embassy in Havana will be reopened next week. Presidents Barack Obama and Raul Castro surprised the world in December with the announcement that the two countries had decided to cease hostilities. Several measures have been taken over the past 7 months to mend relations, including removing Cuba from the list of countries that the U.S. consider to sponsor terrorism. They were on trial along with dozens of other close associates of the deposed leader, accused of suppressing protests during the uprising. Saif al-Islam was not present in court and gave evidence via video link. He is being held by a former rebel group from the town of Zintan that refuses to release him. Former head of intelligence for the Gaddafi regime, Abdullah al-Sinaussi, is among those who also faces the death penalty, as is former PM Baghdadi al-Mahmoudi. They will be given the right to appeal, according to the BBC's John Simpson, who is in Tripoli. Other defendants have received sentences ranging from 5 years to life imprisonment. We'll take a short break. Are back in a moment with the headlines here. APJ Abdul Kalam, India's former president, dies. Bahrain policemen killed in terrorist bombing. Cuba removed from U.S. human trafficking list. Platini will stand for FIFA presidency. And Mexico Seal records 7th Gold Cup. Welcome back to Millennium TV News. Mr. Kalam served as India's 11th president from 2002 to 2007, was popularly known as Missile Man, after pioneering the country's military missile program. He died on Monday after collapsing as he delivered a scientific lecture. India has declared 7 days of national mourning. The former professor's body will be flown to New Delhi on Tuesday for burial. His death is a great loss to the scientific community, Prime Minister Narendra Modi said. He took India to great heights. He showed the way. Indian President Pranab Mukherjee said Kalam would be long remembered for his passion for science and innovation and his contribution as an eminent scientist, administrator, educationist and writer. Mr. Kalam joined the Vikram Sarabhai Space Center in the neighboring state of Kerala in the 1960s as one of its first 3 engineers. He played a major role in the center's evolution to a key hub of space research in India, helping to develop the country's first indigenous satellite launch vehicle. 6 other officers were injured, one seriously, on the island of Sitrah. Bahrain has suffered unrest since a 2011 uprising in which the Shia majority demanded reforms from the Sunni-led government. The latest attack comes just days after Bahraini authorities said they had foiled an arms smuggling plot linked to Iran. 2 Bahrainis were arrested after they admitted receiving a shipment of explosives, automatic weapons and ammunition from Iranian handlers, officials said. Bahrain's government has previously accused Iran of supporting Shia militants in the kingdom. It also recalled its ambassador to Tehran on Saturday over hostile comments by Iranian leaders. The explosion in Sitrah is the latest in a series of blasts that have targeted police in villages with a predominantly Shia population. Roads leading into the town were blocked by officers as the wounded were taken to hospitals. Iran has always denied interfering in Bahrain, although it acknowledges it does support opposition groups seeking greater political and economic rights for the Shia Muslim community. The Taliban has yet to comment on the claim, which was made by top sources within the Afghan administration and intelligence agency. The sources said the reclusive militant leader had died 2 to 3 years ago. The latest claims of Mullah Omar's death are being taken more seriously than previous such reports. The Taliban is expected to issue a statement soon. A spokesman for Afghan President Ashraf Ghani said on Thursday that the authorities were trying to verify the reports. Mullah Omar led the Taliban to victory over rival Afghan militias in the civil war that followed the withdrawal of Soviet troops. His alliance with al-Qaeda leader Osama bin Laden prompted the US-led invasion of Afghanistan in 2001. In the aftermath of the 9/11 attacks on New York and Washington, the Taliban militia won a series of victories under Mullah Omar's leadership. Mullah Omar has been since in hiding with a $10 million, which is a £6.4 million, and which is €9 million, US State Department bounty on his head. Over the years, the Taliban have released several messages purported to be from the fugitive leader. The latest of these statements from mid-July expressed support for peace talks between the Taliban and the Afghan government. However, the message was in the form of a text published on a Taliban website rather than an audio or video recording, fueling rumors that the leader was dead or incapacitated. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has arrived in Beijing to hold talks with his Chinese counterpart and other senior officials amid increased tensions between the two countries over China's treatment of its Muslim Uyghur minority. Erdogan, who is due to meet Xi Jinping later on Wednesday, has repeatedly accused China of systematic oppression against the Uyghurs, who share close linguistic, culture, and religious ties with Turks. The president has previously accused Beijing of genocide in the region, and the gap between Chinese and Turkish views of the Uyghurs are likely to complicate the upcoming discussions on improving relations. The two-sided engaged in a row this year over Uyghurs who fled China to seek refuge in Thailand, with Turkey offering them shelter against Beijing's wishes. Bangkok said this month that it had deported about 100 Uyghurs back to China after sending more than 170 Uyghurs women and children to Turkey in late June. The newspaper suggested that Beijing would pressure Erdogan to stop Turkish officials issuing Uyghurs who illicitly left China with travel documents. As tensions over the refugees mounted this month, activists stormed the Thai consulate in Istanbul and burned the Chinese flag outside Beijing's consulate in the city. China strongly condemned the acts. UEFA head Michael Platini has confirmed his intention to stand for FIFA presidency and succeed Sepp Blatter, aiming to give the scandal-hit governing body the dignity and the position it deserves. Platini, a FIFA vice president, wrote to member federations in Europe on Wednesday saying he will stand in the election and is counting on their support. There are times in life when you have to take your destiny into your own hands. Platini wrote, I am at one of those decisive moments at a juncture in my life and in events that are shaping the future of FIFA. This was a very personal, carefully considered decision, one in which I weighed up the future of football alongside my own future. I am counting on your support and our common love of football so that, together, we can give the tens of millions of football fans the FIFA that they want, a FIFA that is respected, liked, and of the people. Platini has been the obvious candidate to succeed Blatter, his mentor in FIFA politics, but a rift between the long-time allies deepened when Blatter broke a promise to leave office in 2015. Platini chose to run after getting encouragement from some of his fellow FIFA vice presidents last week in St. Petersburg, Russia. 5 of the 6 confederation leaders, including Platini, were there for the 2018 World Cup qualifying draw, with only the North American regional body missing. Platini then traveled to Philadelphia for the Gold Cup final on Sunday and briefed CONCACAF leaders on his plans. The FIFA election will take place during an extraordinary Congress on February 26 next year. Mexico spoiled Jamaica's first trip to the CONCACAF Gold Cup final with a dominant 3-1 triumph that gave them a record 7th cup title. Jamaica had become the first Caribbean team to reach the final, but Iwan Tri stole the storyline at Philadelphia's Lincoln Financial Field by winning their 3rd cup championship from the last 4 played. Despite a fast and inspired start by the Jamaicans, Mexico quickly turned the tide and got goals from Andres Guardado, Jesus Corona, and Oray Peralta in the victory. Mexico will now play with the US on October 9 in a playoff for the region's berth in the 2017 FIFA Confederations Cup. Against Jamaica, Mexico withered an early attack and took control in the 31st minute, where Guardado took a cross and finished with a beautiful left-footed volley into the upper right corner. It was his sixth goal of the tournament, one less than Clint Dempsey of the US, who took the tournament's Golden Boot award. Guardado won the tournament's Golden Ball award as a top player. Jamaica defensive miscues by Michael Hector led to the next two goals from Mexico. In the 47th minute, Corona took the ball from Hector and finished it himself. In the 61st minute, Hector missed a chance to clear from in front of the goal, and that led to Peralta's score. Darren Mattox scored Jamaica's only goal in the 80th minute, scoring for his second successive game. Let's have a look at Millennium TV News Recap. Obama to become first U.S. leader to address African Union. David Cameron says UK property no safe haven for dirty money. IS conflict, NATO to discuss Turkey-Syria border crisis. Cuba removed from U.S. human trafficking list. Libya trial, Gaddafi's son sentenced to death over war crimes. You're up to date with our top stories over here on Millennium TV, and don't forget to log into www.millenniumtv.net. Thank you for staying with us. Allah Hafiz.